right?
Yeah. Some nice moments in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess one of the first things that occurs to me is you're dealing with, I guess, resonance, and I don't know if it's direct feedback, but like sustaining, like laminar sounds, but still with like a lot of attention towards gestural actuation of that, which is something I really like, and I aim for with a lot of my setup. But like, is that a conscious thing of having that juxtaposition of like laminar and sort of vertical kind of gestures and sounds? And
yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know the word laminar.
or I guess like flowing, like
yeah. I mean, I think I guess I like tend to think like let's see. I tend to not think, I guess. I think of sound like pretty vertically. Like I am very sort of like timbre oriented, and then have a problem with like when I get into non-improvised stuff. It's like I have quite a challenge sort of like arranging those sounds in time. And so a lot of what I aim for when I'm improvising is to just sort of like have stuff available so that I can, like I can make the split second decisions rather than having to sort of like think, oh, what would be like the right thing to do here, and let me like carefully arrange everything to allow that to happen soon and bring that up. It's like having access to just like quick gestural stuff is very important. Otherwise I will just kind of like drone steadily. So yeah, this like the Norns setup that I'm working with now is completely geared toward like being able to just sort of like jump to a new timbre quickly. So it's like, it's important to me to be able to like act fast and react, which I know is like, I don't know, it's like what you're doing there as well is like like extremely gestural.
Which is what kind of drew me toward that, I guess, like question, because it like I feel like there was a similar architectural thing in our instruments where there's like sustaining blocks that can happen, but then it quite like with mine, like with a mic or something like to actually intercut that or augment or something like that as like a direct thing. So that kind of contrast is pretty baked into the sort of idea here, and it seems like that was the case there. And I don't know how much of that was like emergent from just the language that we ended up in, or just the performative situation, or if this is like indicative of like how you approach things at large. I mean, seeing like some of the implements you have and like objects it seems like that's the case. Like it's a mic that you have to rub on the cymbals. That isn't a subtle thing. I mean, I guess it can be, but like it's like a
I like to get into subtle territory when I can, but
that's a treat,
yeah, exactly. I also like, I said sort of like I have this tendency to sort of drone, just sort of build a drone and let it sit there. But I always like, that's something that I'll do, and then I am always looking for ways to like, okay, now like move this thing over and like change it fast. So that's like, that like ability to sort of like, we build something, it like there's a feedback system, it kind of plays itself, it gets to a stable point, and then like now we're on to the next thing. That's like, that's important to me.
And is that just like an aesthetic importance? So like, do you like the sound of drones being, to simplify it, like the drones being intercut, or is it like a systematic interest, like where you think that it's important for processes to be interrupted, or are they just overlapping?
I'd say there's overlap. Like it's, I think it aesthetically, it's like it can be just a little boring to, like I spent a good chunk of my early music making time doing like guitar loops and stuff, and like that, there's so much you can do in that paradigm, but also like at the end of the day, at least with the technology that I was working with then, you're still just like building this thing that's like a, 2-bar loop or something. And then you've got your 2-bar loop and it's just there. And like you're sort of stuck there. And so, yeah, I guess I have sort of like I get restless in so it's like totally both an aesthetic and a practical thing where it's like, I get a little bored listening to that, but also like if I'm doing it, I'm like, I got to get out of this room, I've spent too much time here.
I definitely resonate with that. Like there's like, I have like, I guess an inbuilt suspicion or like a sort of reluctance for things just kind of in stasis, oh, that's kind of sounding. And I mean, we did have quite a bit of stasis in that, but I think it was, it felt very charged and like on the brink.
Yeah,
it wasn't like it wasn't like a nice stasis. It was like a, like kind of stasis, which I'm into.
Yeah,
but I think in general, like something just kind of working and sounding nice and just flowing. And I'm like,
what more can we do?
I'm not sure about this. Like it's
like
something's got to happen. And yeah, I think it comes from similar things. Like there's something about the like caloric uptake. So like starting a loop with like particularly a loop pedal, you begin it and you go and it's just there's no more gesture involved in the sound production. Like you've expended those calories and now they will just operate indefinitely without you. And, and particularly in like a multi-source setup like yours, it's very easy for that to just go unchecked. And now you have like 5 loops of just stuff going and like, like without even thinking about it, or sometimes even realizing that it's happening, like you didn't do this, but like I have that, this part of my suspicion comes from that. Just like beginning the thing and then, begin this next thing. Oh, that's kind of nice. And then like, it's just kind of going and it's so easy for that to happen.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's divorced from the sounding result often,
Yeah. I like, I still like, one of the things this does is loop sort of gestural information. And so that's like being able to do that is important, but also then being able to like move the loop around so that it's not just sitting there. I mean, that's something that I'm like continually like working toward more of being able to sort of like set up a system and then like perturb whatever it's doing, sort of, get it out of the stable zone that it settles into. So that's yeah.
And I guess maybe like a kind of a zoomed out macro question about I guess your setup, I guess, but in terms of maybe like rather than asking that kind of way, like maybe like your instrument in this situation, like was like how much of that is like staples of what you're generally working on? How much of it is like are the cymbals like a unit that is just like their thing together, like the Norns, like how much of this is like chunks of what you normally do assembled? How much of it is like part of your normal, like what's the instrument at play here?
Yeah, good question. I mean the this Norns and MIDI controller setup, so not this guy, but these are like this just small tabletop setup is something that I've been playing with a whole lot lately, and do a lot of improvisation with, both like in like a much more melodic context and in stuff that's a little more like this. So that's kind of a standalone thing, but for today, and this is like something I've been experimenting with for a while, is like these are kind of my amplifier, or they're one of them, and then I've got this contact mic to do feedback with those. But that's like an extension of this setup in a way. I mean, this could be its own thing also, but I really like to work with feedback systems that I can then put other things into, and so that's these can feedback with my geophone, and then I'm feeding other sonic information into them through the Norns. So they form a pretty, like, it's all very interactive, but it's basically two parts that are combined. And also these contact mic is going into a delay that is in the Norns as well. So there's that extra, there's kind of a double little curlicue feedback loop going on.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm curious. I mean, I don't know how much you go into this, but like a lot, or a chunk of what you do with this setup is sort of capturing audio from the feedback system and then like chopping it up and various other things. And I'm just curious to like, I don't know, like, are there like different sort of categories of things that you do with the like manipulating looped audio? Or,
Yeah. I mean, I have a bunch of different setups around the similar looking control, or the same controllers, but with different things mapped to them.
Yeah.
Like what I did now is I largely had just a couple effects I could turn on and off for this mic. So including like distortion, a kind of cloud live sampling granularization thing, a more aggressive and obvious stuttery kind of thing. There's a few of those kind of effects, like literally just like effect line on a mic. And a lot of not most of the sounds, but a lot of the sounds in this particular setup is something I've been experimenting more lately, where I had a couple complex synths. So a model of a Seat Lombard 4Cs and a kind of a nice model of like a Rungler. So two kind of like very noisy oscillators that I'm using a bunch of regression that I trained with like a fader. So depending on the direction I'm moving and where I am in the phase of the fader, it sends CV to not random channels, but like whenever I change direction, it sends the current state of the CV to an input of one of these synths, and they're both wired sort of separately, and a couple other things like that. So basically using this as like a mega macro gestural controller for the kind of chaotic synth. So like I was just doing gestural things with this to navigate in like with a sort of one-dimensional controller, navigate a kind of a complex dimensional space. Which is something kind of new in the setup, which I think worked really well and ended up in some of the really interesting territories where I had like these really high-pitched squeals here and like kind of a. So yeah, it's in this kind of it's that approach. So the sampling here was very automatic. So like I would turn on an effect and it would do its thing. But it did kind of chop things in some way. So I wasn't, with this particular setup, deliberately capturing and playing back in a manipulative way, which I have had in other setups. But for this one, it's interesting because the collection of behaviors and how that works and how it interplays with both of our setups does seem like more than that was happening. But like if this, if put out in like a flowchart, there's like a microphone and like 3 effect pedals, and then like a synth with weird mapping or whatever. But like it's sort of like a very simple setup, but the gestural language that it can allow, both with the mic and the surface and the feedback in the room and the interact, ends up being much more than the sum of those individual parts. Which is,
right. Each of those pieces has like a lot of potential chaos in it, and nice. And then negotiating, like using those effects and being familiar with how they behave and under certain circumstances, like getting the knowing them well and kind of playing with that, is I think part of the language of it and the instrument, and even just like the friction-y texture stuff and the cones and all that, like that's makes for a nice thing. And I did have a bit in the middle where I was using some kind of like detuned toy piano samples, which I think was I love
part of that as well. Yeah. So for that one, that part it is being triggered by this mic, but I didn't want to make events, sonic events here to actuate them, so I was kind of doing it on my pants, which still makes sound, but like it's like less like that, not so audible in the room, but was enough to trigger the kind of, as like a way to have like layer it silently from my input, silently layer it into layer on top, which was, made for a nice, one of many moody sections in an overall very moody
Yeah.
improvisation.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Should we play a little more?
Yeah. Let's go.
If you'd like to support the making of these videos, please join our Patreon. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching.